Hello and welcome to episode 59 of the Rockies Now podcast. We are a Colorado Rockies podcast. My name is Steven. Right there is the co-host Tom. Tom, tomorrow is going to be a good day. Herman Marquez is coming back and we have the MLB draft. So tomorrow's going to be awesome.
Yep, last game before the All-Star break. Of course, we got our hopefully I'm hoping for a good day for Marquez, but you could say our ace/former ace Marquez is back. And yeah, like I said, my two teams are picking in the top five. I'm hoping for again. I'll post out who I think my official prediction is going to be, but I'm hoping for two great picks that can become part of the future of both teams.
Yeah, for sure. So for today's podcast episode, and we haven't done one in a while. We've only done a few of them throughout the first half of the year. Kind of wish we've done more, but again, we do a lot of Rockies recaps where we talk about a lot of stuff in that as well. And if you don't listen to the Rockies recaps or check them out on YouTube, feel free to do so because we don't upload our Rockies recaps on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you're listening on one of those two platforms, again, feel free to check us out on YouTube. We go live stream. You can see our faces, see what we look like, see our happy, wonderful faces, beautiful faces. So, so today we're gonna kind of just go back and kind of do a rewind, I guess, of the first half for the Rockies. Kind of share our thoughts, our I guess awards, if you want to call it. Look at different players who we thought had a very good first half, poor first half. Players that we want to see improve going into the second half, and just again overall thoughts on over the last few months to start the year for the Rockies, and then we'll top it off at the end with a little bit of a MLB draft preview for the Rockies. Kind of share some thoughts, what's going on in our brain before tomorrow evening when the draft starts at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, which is 6 Central Standard Time, and then 7 Eastern Time. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So getting started again, when we started the season, we did a podcast talking about how this roster is not too bad. You had Nolan Jones, who was coming off of arguably a guy that could be placed in the Rookie of the Year voting. He placed fourth in 2023. Ezequiel Tovar had a big second half. Really had a nice 2023 season. Brenton Doyle won a Gold Glove. Offensively, not the greatest, but there were changes in his swing as the season came to an end. It was a really tough year in 2023, of course, but there was still somewhat optimism heading into 2024 that, hey, maybe the Rockies can kind of turn this thing around. I mean, we thought that maybe the 102, 103 loss season that we had last year was, kind of the worst part, which unfortunately it probably won't. But, we were kind of optimistic about different parts of the team. And in the rotation, we thought the rotation might be actually okay because last year it was just completely destroyed with injuries, with Senzatella and Marquez going to the IL with Tommy John surgeries. And it was a nightmare. So yeah, we knew that this was probably going to be a difficult year, but maybe an improvement from last year. But we saw the first few weeks was just not good. Of course, we remember the 16-1 loss on opening day. That was pretty ugly. And it was something that's like, oh boy, is this really going to dictate the entire season for us? Rockies lost 3 out of 4 in Arizona. Then they go to, I believe Chicago, got swept, and the defense was horrible. Like everything was just bad. And it was just like a lot of these players on the Rockies team, they're decent, good players. They're not like poor players. It's just that we couldn't find wins. It was just very unlucky. Rockies just couldn't find any consistency to win. Not a lot of confidence in the team because, again, you're going up against pretty good teams like Arizona, and then you're playing against Tampa Bay at home. Of course, that was an amazing grand slam by Ryan McMahon. But the first month of April, Tom, it wasn't pretty. The Rockies had their moments here and there, but it was ugly, and it was something that was like, oh man, here we go again. That sort of feeling.
Particularly, yes, this was not exact. I mean, look at this way, things could be worse, but what can you say? I
Mhm.
look at it every season when you go into a season, whether you're a contender, you're a middling team, or you're a bottom of the league team, you're going to have the same kind of problems. You're just going to have them on different terms of how they impact your output. You're going to have guys who exceed expectations, guys who meet expectations, guys who are below expectations, and of course, plethora of injuries, regardless of how well you prepare for them. And every team's depth is going to be tested on their 40-man roster, and vice versa, depending how many moves you have to make. So far for the Rockies, you highlighted on the record. It's just to start the season, some guys just did not have what we expected out of the game. I mean, the most obvious one, Kyle Freeland, I'm sorry to say. I mean, watching that game opening night in Arizona against the Diamondbacks, it's just, oh my goodness. It's just, you kind of put your head you kind of put your head like this and go, is this a nightmare? Can I please,
Yeah.
pinch yourself? Can I wake up? Um, but again, since he's come back from the aisle, he has been fantastic. So I'm not here to harp on that. But I'm not going to try to point fingers. It's just some guys have, due to struggling with injuries, or just have not met the expectations of what was expected of them. I'm sorry, Nolan. I'm not trying to be mean when I say it. Nolan. It's just he's just that back. There's got to be something wrong with that back. I hope it's not what Chris Bryant is going through. And again, that's another thing. Chris Bryant, clearly, we're not going to harken talk about it being a bad contract. It was a Dick Monfort signing, not a Bill Schmidt signing. But at the end of the day, there's still positives to look at in terms of guys who are either living to what was expected of them or even taking the next step forward. You can look at Tovar's doing that. Ryan McMahon taking even further step forward. You can, of course, talk about Bretton Doyle from this year, 2023 to 2024. It's a night and day difference, especially on having higher quality at bats. And even some of the pitchers are showing good. I mean, like I said, my guy Victor Vodnik is showing he could be at least a setup man or a solid middle relief option going forward for the future. And you look at somebody like of course we'll talk about potential trade chips, but you could even take a look at the guys. Jordan Beck, it's unfortunate he got injured. Amador got his taste of the big leagues, but there's still positives to look at as far as shaping the team. But there's going to be subtractions, I think, between now and the end of this month. The only question is where they're going to go, I think. But all in all, it will get into more dive deep later. But of course, all in all, it was a first half to be expected. But again, second half can be fun because not only could we see changes to the roster, but we can also see us play spoilers, or you could say give a fit to the contending teams trying to push into the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so here I am on statmuse.com. Shout out to those guys. I'm looking at the Rockies record. So in March they went 1-3. Of course, they only played 4 games in that month at the end of the end of the month against Arizona. They went 6-19 in April. 240 win percentage. Um, yeah, it was bad. May, however, was a pretty good month, 14-13. It was nice. The Rockies, they got a lot of wins, and especially that's when we started seeing a turn for the Rockies. They started playing a lot better against teams that were above 500. And it's been super weird because we've talked about this on the recaps, but it's really weird how the Rockies actually play better against teams that are way above 500, or they're playoff contending teams, and they play absolutely horrible against teams that are just not doing well. For example, the Rockies didn't play well against the White Sox. They almost got swept by the White Sox, and then the Rockies they lost a series to Oakland in Oakland, and here Oakland is basically losing on purpose at this point. Really focusing on the move to Sacramento and everything. So those series really upsetted a lot of us as Rockies fans because it's like, oh man, this is a series where the Rockies could definitely walk away either winning the series or sweeping the series. And but yeah, it's been really weird. But yeah, Rockies went 14-13. I think it's like the first 500 month they had. I want to say since last year or in a couple years. So it was just like, oh, okay, all right, that's improvement. And then month of June, it was horrible. Worse than the month. Well, basically about I take that back. So really, it was about the same as the month of April. The Rockies were 7-20 in the month of June, and it was definitely a June swoon for the Rockies. And the series against I gotta say, well, the series against the Cardinals was fun. It was a series split. St. Louis hasn't been a great place for the Rockies in years past, but I think last year the Rockies won 2 out of 3. This year they split the series, But as the month progressed, we just saw things just go downhill for the Rockies. Injuries, Nolan Jones just was, even when he came back from his injury, he just was not doing well. Um, and, Kyle Freeland, I think he was still not yet back. And so the Rockies had a thin rotation. And really, the only solid pitcher for the Rockies in the month of June was really Cal Quantrill. And Austin Gomber, probably number two behind him. But offensively, the Rockies, they just had a poor month. Hunter Goodman had a nice month. I don't have the stats pulled up in front of me for him. Um, but there was some nice moments in the month of June, but again, record wise, absolutely horrible, 7-20. And so far here in the month of July, they're 5-8. So a little bit of a improvement. They're only 2 wins away from tying June's win record. So that's an improvement. That's something nice to see. Um, yeah, how can I say this? So really, the season has been really the defining thing that's really hurt the Rockies this year. Um, Start off with, I guess, the negatives of the first half of the Rockies. It has been the bullpen, and we talked about this several times in our recaps. The bullpen has been it's been the worst bullpen in baseball, and actually, it's a historically bad bullpen, and we talked about it. I think we talked about it last week. Um, the bullpen needs a full tear down, however you call it, in the offseason. Maybe keep a few guys like Victor Vodnik, Justin Lawrence, Nick Mears, maybe Tyler Kinley, maybe, but really, it's not good. Jalen Beeks, he has not performed well the way that we've hoped he would be, because when he got picked up off waivers from Tampa during the offseason, I was excited. I was like, okay, he's Tampa, he's from a good organization that knows how to develop pitchers. They do really good at that in Tampa, and so I was like, okay, this is interesting. I like it. Well, he's not done well. I mean, yeah, he has, I believe, 9 saves on the season, but he just does not look comfortable in the late innings, and part of that could be nerves, because maybe he hasn't had a whole lot of experience in that department of closing out games late, or in the eighth inning. But yeah, it's really, I feel like the Rockies would definitely have a much better record if it wasn't for the bullpen, because there's been almost every single week there's a game where the Rockies, where we'll write down on our list, yeah, that's a game we should have won. And so I guess the negatives really have been the bullpen, and I guess I'll add this too as my final negative in the first half for the Rockies has been the offense. Not a lot of power until recently. Um, Brenton Doyle, who will, we might talk a little bit more as we go throughout the show tonight. But Brenton Doyle, he had a really good start, then kind of slowed down a little bit, still was doing, well. He was getting on base. But then over the last 3 weeks, my goodness, this is arguably the best hitter best hitter in baseball. He's definitely up there. Um, Definitely the best hitting center fielder right now. 14 home runs, tied with Ryan McMahon in team home runs. And Ryan McMahon, as we know, is an all-star. He's going to Arlington. So happy for Mac. But there's a debate. There's definitely a discussion where Doyle should definitely be going as well. And we talked about this before we started the show tonight. You look at the stats of Jackson Merrill, who is going to the All-Star game, and we look at Brenton Doyle. Like, Brenton Doyle should be in the All-Star game, and he's not, unfortunately. And shout out to Punk Rockies on X or Twitter. Um, you know, they put up a picture of website. I forget what it's called, but basically you compare the stats of different players. And yeah, all I have to say is, if you look at that post, Doyle should be in there. I mean, he has very good categories, and again, McMahon and Doyle, they both have um, very similar stats this year. And of course, Doyle did kind of get hot late, but yeah, like, there's been a few bright moments offensively, but again, the offense has still been poor. It's been a below average offense this year, but there are bright guys this year that have really turned it around, like Brenton Doyle. He might be our most improved player of the year. Of course, our awards will go at the end of the year, but if we're doing mid-season awards right now, I gotta say Brenton Doyle's probably most improved player award, and close to being team MVP here in the first half of the Rockies, because he's just been great. But other than Ryan McMahon, Brenton Doyle, Ezekiel Tovar, the offense has not been good for the Rockies. So those are my two negatives, and I'll hand it over to Tom before we kind of quickly share our positives before we start wrapping up the first segment of the show tonight. So Tom, off to you.
Well, the biggest problem, of course, is no. I'm going to agree with you. I can't make it any lighter. The bullpen needs almost basically complete overhaul. Um, it's just there's not too many guys you can just rely on. You don't have that lockdown closer. Every team has that guy they know in the ninth inning. You give the ball to him. You have you could say a 98% plus chance to win. There's always a puncher's chance. I don't say 100% because there's always a puncher's chance. So that's the problem. Now, am I saying they're now? I've always hearkened Vodnik, Beeks. Well, the thing about Beeks is that it's kind of of course, the Rays have a knack for developing pitchers, but at the same time, they have a knack for knowing when to let it go of a guy at the right time. So, am I saying Jalen Beeks is washed up? No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying it's just when you trade with the Rays, especially with pitcher, it's always buyer beware. He and Vodnik, I believe, can be definitely serviceable parts going forward of this bullpen if you want to push to the next level. Lawrence, again, I don't know if he's hurt or if he's just struggling with his release part because his sliders often seem to get away from him, whether he leaves it over the plate or just flails way outside the strike zone and he walks too many hitters. I don't know, but the jury's out on him at this point, but we'll have to wait and see. Maybe he might be struggling with some kind of injury. Again, he does have a very unorthodox delivery as compared to a lot of other people. It's not submarine or sidearm. It's kind of a really long outside delivery, but either way, we'll see. Another negative is just this team, once again, they don't have a winning record at home, but just a putrid record on the road. Right now, the Rockies are 13-35 on the road. It's just bad, really bad. Here's a couple. Just talking about the record thing, just want to make sure we have a winning record this season against the Padres at 5-2, and we, of course, the team we have a perfect record against is the Texas Rangers. So that's something to be proud about. But we do have a no wins against the Mets so far, the Astros or the Cubs, but that's another story. Again. The other thing is I also like how in one-run games here, they are 15. Sorry, I know this is kind of a positive, but it leads into a negative. They're 15-13 this season in one-run games, but they're 6-25 in blowouts. It's just, which means one-run game, which means blowouts is 5 runs or more. So it's just, and of course, some of those 25 wins have been where we had the lead and we just gave it away. Yeah. I think we said, 18 blown saves this year? Or 17.
Yeah,
and that's not even counting the leads that were maybe 3 runs or more that we blew, because I think we had at least 2 of those. It's just, again, the starters have been good even when they've struggled. The Gomber, Quantrill, Freeland, Hudson, even Feltner, whoever you talk about as a starter, there's been countless times that they've given this team a chance to win, and then the bullpen just, I don't want to say just throws it right back to the other team, but they just blow it. And again, I'm not saying I could be a reliever. It's a tough job to do. Come right in, get your best stuff going. That's the problem. I would say the underlying, but also I think there's a lot of inconsistency on offense. The famous saying is you don't want your whole offense to be hot at the same time, so they'll all get cold at the same time. But it just seems that at times, most of, if not this entire offense, just all gets cold at the same time. There was when McMahon was struggling, of course, Tovar was struggling. And the only guy right now who's really putting up the worth of his bat is definitely Brenton Doyle. I'm not saying the whole offense is cold, because Sam Hiller had 2 home runs in one game the other day. But it's just, I also think that the offense is too inconsistent at times to either help add on to a lead or come back when they're down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, over the last few years, we've seen, a lot of us has seen that the Rockies in runners in scoring position have been really basically bottom tier in baseball. Which definitely won't help you get wins by any means of the imagination. Yeah, I agree with you. I will say it was really cool, and I kind of forgot to mention this, but the 7-game winning streak, which was the longest winning streak for the Rockies since 2019, when it was in May going into June. That was the longest winning streak the Rockies have had in several years. That was fun. And again, it kind of gave us a glimpse of hope, because Jordan Beck had just recently gotten called up and he was starting to turn things around. Didn't really have a nice start. Kind of was swinging and missing a little bit, and but then he got hot. He got 2 home runs right before he got his hand injury, which, by the way, I think he should be coming back, like in a matter of a few weeks. So I've heard. Um, yeah, yeah. Again, offense very inconsistent. You'll have these games where the Rockies score 6, 7, 8 runs. Next game they get shut out. And what we saw early in the season, we saw a ton of shutouts. The Rockies were shut out quite a bit, and some blowout losses. But we've seen also too, to where the Rockies have been able to stay close in games, and either they're losing or either they have the lead. And like you pointed out, the Rockies, they have multiple blown losses this year to where they could have won the game. And if you get those wins back and you don't blow those games, you're talking about a team that could be in wild card contention, because now with the extra wild card team in there, you have a little bit of a better chance. And the Rockies, they would be close to that. So, this is a team that, honestly, again, does not have a right now, does not have a bad roster necessarily. It's just that the bullpen has been bad, and the starting pitching depth hasn't been that great. Again, we're still, waiting for Senzatella to come back, but Marquez, he's literally pitching tomorrow, which is going to be awesome. And it's going to be great. And the last time he started a game, I believe, was in Cleveland last year when he exited early and when he just fell apart on the mound, which was hard to watch. So part of it part of the issue as well is Chris Bryant and Nolan Jones. Nolan Jones especially. Chris Bryant is a whole topic for another time. Um, I might quickly talk about him here in a second, but for Nolan Jones, this is your team MVP of last year. He has hardly contributed this year. Of course, he's been injured for majority of the time, but Nolan Jones is just not feeling it, no confidence. And we talked about Brenton Doyle, who was on MLB Network just the other day talking to Alana Rizzo, how confidence has been one of the biggest reasons why Doyle is doing so well over the last 3 weeks or so, right? Where Nolan Jones is just, I think a lot of it has to do with pressure from last year. A lot of people thought that Nolan Jones was going to be the next Rocky superstar. He was going to be the next, I guess, savior for the Rockies to, turn this thing around, and really people depended on him to lead this team. And yet after last year, he's only played one full season of baseball. And actually last year didn't really count a full season because he came up in late May, and so it's a lot of pressure to put on a guy like Nolan Jones, who has had hardly a full season of playing time. And people are, and I'm not saying this is wrong for them saying this, but they kind of gave Nolan a superstar status to the point where he's like, oh, I got to do this. I got to be got to be better. Got to do this. Got to do that. Where really, I just feel like he didn't have to change much at all. Like, just be Nolan Jones, be who you are. And I think that was one of the big things last year in spring training when he came over from Cleveland to Colorado in spring training. He did not have a good spring training, and the Rockies, they didn't even send him up. They put him down in Albuquerque, and he was pretty discouraged about that. And I think he even got frustrated with that. And he talked to his parents, and his parents were like, Nolan, just be you. You don't have to be anybody else. Just be you. Just be Nolan Jones. And then he started hitting Albuquerque, right? And so Nolan Jones, without him in the lineup and without him contributing, I think that definitely worsens the offense quite a bit. Um, and of course, Chris Bryant, like I said, you can only hope that he can contribute a little bit. I think well, for sure, I don't think for sure his best days are over. But I still think that there might be a chance or two where he still could get you a home run or two, but it's just the injuries have just knocked him down every single time he gets back up. He gets knocked down with another injury, and it's not like, oh, I'm gonna hurt myself. I'm gonna run into a wall in LA and break my back or whatever. It's not that. It's just he's been like the word we've used, incredibly unlucky, to the point where just like you really can't really see him on the team much longer if this continues. So, and injuries has been huge for the Rockies here in the first half as well. Maybe not as much as what, some people think, but it still has been an issue. Blackman, he's kind of not had a Charlie Blackman-esque first half because he's hitting, I believe, like 250, something like that. Has like 6 home runs now in the season. Got a couple home runs in the series against the Mets, but Blackman, his age is starting to show. So really, as we head into the second half, you're just hoping that Nolan Jones can get back to being healthy, can get back to being Nolan Jones of last year. Brenton Doyle continue to stay hot. Ezekiel Tovar, who I think he's starting to turn the corner after going, was it 0 for 30 or 0 for 31? And he had a horrendous month of June and early part of July. McMahon, being an all-star, I really hope that he doesn't, have a poor second half, because I feel like that's usually what happens in baseball, especially if you're a Rockies player, where you'll have an elite first half, all-star first half, you cool down in the second half, like what we saw last year. McMahon had a cool, when I mean cool, I mean he had a pretty poor second half. So I just hope that doesn't happen for him. But really, you're just focusing on seeing the young players, because that's really, as I think the Rockies are starting to realize that they need to let Aaron Chunk, guys like that play. Michael Toglia, for instance, we've talked about him on the recaps, how he's earned it. Yeah, the numbers don't look great. The batting average, the on base percentage, not great. He's more of a hit for power guy, but Toglia, he's earned it. So let those kids play and see what they got. And again, it's not going to be a season where we're going to be hitting 500 or hitting 70 wins. It's going to be another. It's going to. I feel it's going to be another 2023 year for the Rockies. You just hope that this rebuild is progressing, and it's getting closer to where you're turning this thing around in the next year or two, while you continue to call up these prospects. So as we wrap up the first segment, and before we start talking about the draft tomorrow, let's kind of quickly do of course, we won't necessarily post this on our social medias, but let's do our like awards, if you want to call it that, for each player, for Cy Young, best hitter, most improved, that sort of thing. So, Tom, I'll let you go first, and then I'll go after you.
Well, in terms of the first half, I'm going to give my first half Cy Young award. I'm going to give it to Cal Quantrill. When I look at him in terms of comparison of the Rockies pitchers, he's been the most consistent in terms of performance, and he's had the shortest cold streak, if you will. He continues to give the Rockies. First of all, he leads the Rockies in terms of innings at 102 and a third. He also leads Rockies in starts at 19. Gomber and Feltner right behind him at 18, and Dakota Hudson, now DFA, has 17. So he has been not only given them consistent quality starts, he's also been durable. He does not lead the team in strikeouts. That honor goes to Ryan Feltner with 84 comparison to Quantrill 70. But I'd say, like I said, I really like the trade in terms of what you were doing, what you're going to get. You were going to get a guy who's going to give you consistent starts in terms of innings. Hopefully you're hoping for quality starts. And I do like the fact that adding a guy who relies a lot more on pitches that live down in the zone and induces contact, is not a heavy strikeout pitcher. You're letting the defense behind him make the outs. And so far for him, that's worked to their advantage. So I'm giving it to him. Comeback, or I should say, I don't want to say comeback player of the year. I'm going to say most improved. It's obvious. Brenton Doyle, like I said, I don't need to go into much of an explanation. Night and day difference between 2023 and 2024. He's having much more quality at bats, and he's showing how strong he actually is. Again, he's tied with Ryan McMahon for the team leading home runs. And what can I say? The guys, like he said in the interview with Alana Rizzo, playing center field at Coors Field makes him better, because the ball and any fly ball, line drive, or ground ball hit at Coors Field plays differently than it does anywhere else. So that plays to his advantage, is to know how to cover ground, take better angles, judge the ball differently. So yeah, to me, it's him. MVP of the first half is Ryan McMahon, not just because he's the all-star, but I've talked about this before. He's been steady and consistent in terms of his production ever since becoming an everyday starter in 2019. But this year, he's really taken a bigger step forward and embraced, I think you can say, has matured even more as a hitter. Again, he is tied right now. Let me go back to my numbers here. He is currently, oops, my mistake. Scroll down. He is currently, like I said, tied with Bretton Doyle for the team lead in home runs, and leads the team in RBIs at 45, he doesn't lead the team in OPS and OPS plus. That goes to Bretton Doyle because, well, but again, I think Ryan Mack has been fantastic. But one key stat, you and I talked about this in our pre-show meeting. It's a right. Ryan McMahon this season is doing incredible against left-handed pitching. Here's his slash line: a batting average of 301, on base of 378, 487 slug, and an 865 OPS against lefties. And again, lefty hitter against lefty pitchers. That's fantastic. As you pointed out, he struggled in the past against lefties. Not in 2024. No chance. And I'm going to give my guy to keep an eye on in the second half. I think I've talked about him a little bit more. I'd say Michael Toglia. He's the guy to keep an eye on in the second half. In half as many games as most of the everyday players, he is only one home run behind Doyle and McMahon for the team lead with 13. That guy's got pop. Again, his batting average is a little lower than you like, but that's due to the inconsistency. I think I attribute that to his inconsistent playing time in the beginning of the season where he couldn't get his rhythm and his momentum and his timing down. But again, I texted this. I think I just texted it to you, or I posted it on a comment on our Instagram page. I'd say he should be batting in the top 5 going forward for the rest of the second half. Give him as many at bats as possible. Let's see what this guy can do. And one last point, I think for the second half, when I look at the top 5 hitters in the lineup, I would still. You point out Charlie Blackmon again. His age is starting to show. He's not going to be 2017 Charlie Blackmon. But it's not bad. I mean, he has a 737 OPS and a 101 OPS plus. I don't think that takes into account today's game, though. But he's above league average at 38 years old. Just let him keep leading off, do his thing. But for the spots after him, I would keep Tovar, McMahon, Toglia, and Doyle in those 4 spots behind him. You could probably work it like righty Tovar, lefty McMahon, righty Doyle, and then switch hitter Toglia batting 5th. I would seriously make that your top 5 for the rest of the season. Give those 4 guys in particular after Charlie Blackmon, give them as many at bats as possible, give them their shot, see what they can do, and figure out what you need to build around through that from there. I love that top 5 of the lineup right there for the second half.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, with Elias Montero, and you don't like to see people lose their jobs, but clearly Michael Toglia is their choice, and I think they made the right decision here. Montero, he just was not figuring it out, and I know he has hot stretches late in the season. Usually he gets hot like August, September, but it just right now, Toglia, once you get players their playing time, just wait and see. And I know some players don't work out. It's part of the game. But Toglia, he's had flashes in the past where it's like, okay, we see something there. Now, can he sustain that? And this is the first time that I've been super excited to see Toglia play first base every single day because he's contributing in some way, somehow. And another positive thing for Toglia, and we mentioned this on the recap, he's walking quite a bit more than he used to. And that tells you that he's getting plate discipline. He's starting to learn how to lay off of those pitches, whether it's down and in. A lot of lefties, especially when Toglia bats from the right handed box, a lot of lefties will try to throw that slider or curveball down in the dirt where it goes towards his feet. He's laid off that pitch. I think that's one of the best. I think that's one of the pitches I've noticed that he's laid off the most. And then the pitch away. So he's getting a good discipline at the plate, getting a good eye. That's what you need, and that's how you become that's one of the tools you can become to become a good hitter, right? So absolutely. So yeah, Toglia definitely got to watch out for. For me, I guess I'm gonna agree with you. Quantrill definitely the first half Cy Young winner for the Rockies. He carried the team on his back, in many of these starts to where the offense might have been, struggling to score runs, but he kept the Rockies in games. And there were games where the Rockies came back late and won the game. Quantrill, it's to be seen, but There's some reports saying that the Rockies they might consider trading him. They're going to listen, but there's also reports saying that the Rockies would like to extend him. Why not? I mean, I know there's that concern of like, hey, what if he doesn't do well next year? Well, again, Chase Dollander, he pitched today in the futures game. He could be up here next year. Let's just say that he has a really nice second half in Hartford. Maybe the Rockies, would be willing to have him skip AAA, which I think should happen because I personally think Rockies pitchers should skip the whatever's in whatever altitude is in Albuquerque because it's like 7,000 feet above sea level, like 2,000 feet above course field. I personally think that pitchers generally should not go to Albuquerque, especially Rockies pitchers. It's just me, but I mean the Rockies they're getting arms, and so if you lose Cal Quantrill in the offseason, uh, there might be some negativity there from some Rockies fans saying, "Oh, we should have traded him. We should have traded him." Well, it's the same thing with John Gray. The Rockies wanted to extend John Gray back in 2021 in the offseason, and John Gray was on board with that. Up until later in the offseason, John Gray was like, "You know what, guys, I'm going to move on. I'm going to I need to move on to a different team." But I think he didn't get the money he wanted, and maybe the Rockies will give Cal Quantrill a bunch of money. I don't know, but he definitely deserves the recognition. And like we've said a couple times before, if he would have had another good solid start to, I think he could definitely be in the All-Star game right now. It's just that there are a lot of good pitchers, especially on the Phillies, like we talked about right before we started tonight. A lot of good pitchers over there in Philadelphia. I think Quantrill might have been close, but still not enough to get in, but great first half of Cal Quantrill, and it's something that I've been really, really happy to see, and I'm very happy that we made this trade in the first place. Uh, there were some question marks, especially with his injury last year in Cleveland, and it was kind of a question mark. It was like, should we really get this guy because Cleveland had cut him because they were going through their whole TV situation over there during spring training, not spring training, at the end of last year. So they had to cut payroll and they had to cut, Quantrill. But he's been a welcome sight for a lot of us Rockies fans. So he definitely earns that Cy Young first half award. Most improved, like I said, Brenton Doyle. Um, for rookie of the year, well, again, it's, we're not doing these until the end of the season and we'll be posting them. But I guess the best rookie so far for me would probably be Hunter Goodman. I really like what he's been able to do at the plate. He's still struggling to swing at that high cheese up in the zone. But the month he had in the month of June, where he had that 2-homer game against Pittsburgh, was mighty impressive. He had that good stretch, good homestand while I was gone in Michigan. He was just on fire. Like you could not get him out, it felt like, or he was getting on base. And he actually had a nice little road trip himself a few days ago in Cincinnati, where he had, I think, 2 doubles in that one ball game. So he's starting to figure it out, and he's having a little bit better, discipline at the plate, but still a lot to learn. Again, he has yet to play a full season in baseball, in Major League Baseball in the big leagues. So give him some time, let him do what he does, because last year we saw how crazy he was in Albuquerque. I guess rookie of the year for me would be Hunter Goodman for the first half. That is rookie of the first half. I'm trying to think if there's any. I guess team MVP for me. I'm gonna go Britton Doyle here. It's so hard to not to pick Rymack, because Rymack, again, I feel like he's carried this team offensively and just in the clubhouse as well. Because next to Charlie, Mack is one of the oldest guys on this team, and he's a veteran of this team. He's been around since 2017. Made his debut for the Rockies in 2017. But I'm gonna go with Doyle. I think this is his year, man. Again, he could get cold. I really, knock on wood, hopefully that doesn't happen. But he's been the team MVP, like best defensive center fielder in the game right now, going to win another Gold Glove. We already know it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when is the gold going to show up at his doorstep, So, but offensively, you're looking at a guy that could potentially, for real, win Major League Baseball comeback player of the year. you're looking at a guy that could potentially be a finalist for that for sure. I think he definitely should, because if he's not, I'll be super pissed. But, and I think a lot of us would agree that we would too as well, if he can continue this in the second half, which we really hope he can. So I got to go with first half MVP. Why not go with Brenton Doyle? It's close, but I'm going with Brenton Doyle here.
And then they do give out an award for this. I'll just say reliever of the first half is Victor Vodnik.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I'm going on board with you as well. Very quickly, I was looking at statmuse.com, and I kind of saw this stat hidden. Let me see if I can pull it back up here. Yeah, look, again, this year it was just one of those. It's one of those like years where just like you don't want to look at the stats. It's kind of bad, but okay. So like for instance, this year's batting stats for the Rockies as a team. Um, they're 20th in runs scored in baseball. So it's below average offense. So again, not the worst, but below average. 12th in hits, so that's not too shabby. So right around the middle of the pack, maybe a little bit, in that top 15, which is good. Of course, you're playing at Coors Field, which kind of helps. But again, it's an offense that we've seen this year. It has been very inconsistent. Seventh in doubles. So of course, with Coors Field with the big gaps, you get a lot of doubles there. 10th in triples. 19th in home runs. So that's a little bit. I think that's a little bit better from years past, where the Rockies were basically near dead last in home runs. So they've gotten some power this year. And I think a lot of it has to do with Ryan McMahon, Brenton Doyle, Michael Toglia, Hunter Goodman, even 21st in runs batted in, 24th in walks. So the Rockies, they don't walk a whole lot. They're one of the worst teams in baseball that doesn't walk. 22nd in hit by pitch, which doesn't even matter, and then 28th in strikeouts, 914 strikeouts. So they strike out a lot. And 20 stolen bases, or I should say not 20 stolen. They're 20th in stolen bases with 53, and they're 18th in baseball in caught stealing. So the offense is getting a little bit better from past years, but still below average. Not the worst, but it's below average. But it is nice to see that there is power starting to come back into the lineup, which the Rockies desperately need, and that's one of the key successes for the Rockies for moving forward. Of course, pitching, but offense, you need power in that lineup, because you go back to 2013, 2014, 2015, when the Rockies had insane power. They were the best offense in baseball. They just had zero pitching, and the Rockies weren't that bad during those years. I mean, yeah, they were 70, 80 lost teams, but they were competitive for a majority of the season. Where, of course, this year, the last couple of years, it's just been pretty bad. But offensively, below average, and then pitching wise, we already know. All the stats. If you go on statmuse.com, I highly recommend it. They do a great job over there. But if you look at all the stats, pitching wise for the Rockies, it's looking at it. You're basically 28th and 20th to 30th in baseball in a lot of these categories. The best category for the Rockies, I'm looking at right now, is they're 25th in saves, 19 saves as a whole, which that's the best pitching stat they have. The worst, well, they have a bunch of them. So they're 30th in hits allowed, 30th in earned runs, 30th in runs allowed, 26th in walks, 30th in strikeouts, 30th in ERA, 28th in losses, 28th in wins. So pitching staff, not good. Offense, below average. So again, not a good Rockies team. But again, you're just looking to make small adjustments, make small improvements as you head to the second half. But at the same time, though, it's part of the rebuild. It's going to happen. It's not like, oh, why is this team so bad? We need to. No, it's part of the rebuild. So expect this to happen. But you just want to see the small positives, even if it's a lot, not a lot. You just want to see the positive, and that's the important thing. And if we see positives in there, that's a good sign. And I think there has been positives in certain players. It's just that first half not something we wanted. So let's move on to our final segment as we wrap up tonight. So let's talk about the draft tomorrow. So for those who don't know, we're going to be going live here tomorrow on YouTube and Instagram. we'll be reacting live to the MLB draft, to the first 5 to 10 picks. So Tom, give me some players that you're looking at tomorrow that you would like to see the Rockies go get, or do you like, or players that you think the Rockies might have on their board when they go at number 3 tomorrow, because that's a big one. I mean, this is going to be one of the biggest drafts the Rockies have had in multiple years, because there's a pretty good few bats up there in the top 3, top 4. So yeah, why don't you give me some of your players that you think the Rockies could definitely get, and some players that you want to see the Rockies get, or get, I should say, Rockies player get at number 3. So give me your thoughts on that.
Well, there's a couple guys who are gaining tractions. I mean, the one thing is, I was surprised when you pointed this out to me when I was looking at Joe Doyle's final prediction for his final mock draft. It did shock me a little bit that, I mean, maybe again, shockers do happen. It was surprising that the Guardians had JJ Weatherholt drafting. He had the Guardians drafting JJ Weatherholt number 1 overall. He's very talented, but again, I mean, I know if history's taught me anything about drafts, the best player overall doesn't always necessarily get picked first overall. The one example that comes to mind, this is an NFL example, when Mario Williams got picked number 1 overall by the Texans, and that was a shocker because everybody thought they were going to pick Reggie Bush, but he ended up going number 2 to the New Orleans Saints, and of course, the rest is history with both those two. But that's a different sport and a different era of sport. It's when I look at this draft thing, I would say Condon and Bazana are just the clear 2 number 1 and 2 guys. I mean, everyone's talking about Bazana. He's an international player, played at a top tier program like Oregon State. Not to say Georgia, where Condon plays, is not a great program at all. And everyone's talking about, we hark on this all the time. Rockies need pitching, need pitchers. Every team could use pitchers. Last year, I think we got a huge steal in terms of getting Chase Dollander, who many people, including former Rockies GM Dan O'Dowd, harked as the number 1 pitcher in that draft class, and it shocks everybody that he slid to number 9. So good on us. That was so far, knock on wood, their success, a good thing so far. And who, by the way, did pitch very well today in the Futures game.
Yeah.
So, and I think it was people have the Rockies shocking people and picking Chase Burns. Again, he comes from a very top tier program like Wake Forest. They produced a number of great players over the past several years, or even before the last several years. I can give you examples, but not too many come to my off the top of my head. But I would like to see a position player. I want the Rockies. And also, I would like it to be a college player. And I'm not trying to down high school players. I just don't see the only high school player in the top 25 that I really, really like is Connor Griffin. He comes from Jackson Prep, shortstop, outfielder. I do think of the top 25 guys that I'm looking at, he is the one high school player that really intrigues me in terms of talent and potential and what scouts are saying about him, particularly Jim Callis of MLB.com. So that's somebody I would keep an eye on. He actually had my other team, the White Sox, picking him in the first round with the number 5 pick, but we'll have to wait and see. But ultimately, I don't know if we're going to give our pick as to where I think it is, but I have them picking the Rockies picking a college player. I'll Twitter exit tomorrow. And I think maybe we might even post something on Instagram as well saying Steven picks this guy, Tom picks this guy, but we'll talk about that. But I ultimately think they're going to pick a college bat with the number 3 overall pick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess, I mean, I might just say who I want them to get, rather than who I think they could get. I don't know. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Again, we'll have a little bit of a segment before the draft begins. We're going to be going live about 15-20 minutes before the draft actual starts. The coverage starts doing the countdown for the clock for the teams. For me, this has been this is probably the draft I've kept my attention on the most in the last few years. Like last year was my very first time. I was like, okay, I'm looking at some of the guys in the top 10, where this year I've looked at the top 15, top 20 guys. But really, especially the top 5, of course, because the Rockies have they have the number 3 pick. And so naturally I looked at, the top 5 prospects, because you're looking at potentially the future Rocky. And of course, Bazana was the guy that I first looked at, and I was like, this would be a fun guy to get because originally I think he was like number two, number three, slated, early on several months ago, before they kind of shifted to where they are now in the rankings. Um, but so tomorrow for Cleveland, a lot of people are saying that Cleveland could potentially go under slot, basically save some of the money that they have at that slot to get a JJ Weatherholt, for instance, who's ranked fourth, I believe, and in that slot, I believe it's the Athletics, and so some people believe that the Guardians, they're gonna go under slot here, save some money for their later picks in that round, and then in the second round. But other people are saying no, that's not the case. Bazana, like again, the Guardians, even if they get Bazana, they're still somewhat saving some of that money. I'm not sure how because I'm not expert on that, but somehow they're still saving some money by getting Bazana, but you're still paying a lot of um, some money. But some players they'll drop their price tag, I guess, if that is the word or if that makes sense. Um, Charlie Condon is very intriguing because, our friends at Blake Street Banner, they gave a comp of Chris Bryant, the good Chris Bryant, not the injury prone Chris Bryant, the good Chris Bryant when he was in Chicago. And I like that. I like that comp. He's tall, and the only thing that, there are some question mark, of course, is he did swing and miss a little bit, but again, he's still a very good college bat, but he doesn't have a lot of speed, which, I mean, the Rockies do like their speed, but Chris Bryant, for instance, doesn't have a lot of speed. Some really good players in baseball don't have a lot of speed. Like, you could name them off the top of your head. Aaron Judge. I don't think he's. Is he? Again, I'm not a Yankee fan, but there are some superstars that never really had good solid speed, like Todd Helton. He wasn't a super fast player yet. He's a Hall of Famer, right? And he's getting inducted later this month. But anyways, like Condon, he's a guy that's the Rockies could very well get. And, some people say, well, he could go to the Reds, which he very well could. But the Reds could get a Chase Burns, which, I think could definitely happen because they could use another pitcher and they're building a very young rotation. Of course, they have Lodolo, they have Brett Lauder, who they drafted last year, ahead of the Rockies, and then Hunter Green. I think Burns would look kind of good in that rotation. But the thing with Burns, which makes me concerned as a Rockies fan, just a little bit. Again, I mentioned this before on our social media pages. I'd be okay if the Rockies draft Burns tomorrow. Like, I'm not. I don't want people to get upset. I don't want to get upset if we draft Burns tomorrow. I'm not going to be like, oh, that's a horrible pick. No, Burns is the best pitcher in this draft. Now, he's not Paul Skeens by any means whatsoever, but he's a good pitcher. He's a good pitcher, but there are concerns about his fastball. He leaves it over the plate. It gets smashed whenever his command's off over the plate, right? So that's just the concern. And of course, the slider's not going to move as much in Colorado. I think he might have a changeup as well in there. So there are some question marks, but still, getting Burns would be a nice pickup for the Rockies. Would likely move quickly through the farm system for the Rockies. So I would be fine with the pick, but personally for me, I'm with you, Tom. I feel like this team needs a bat. This team needs a guy that will move through the system quickly. That could be here by the end of next year. And I feel like these top three guys that we're looking at in the top three ranking for these prospects, all three of these guys I feel like are going to be Dylan Cruz's and Wyatt Langford types, where they're going to be in the big leagues in the next year. By the end of 2025. Dylan Cruz, who got drafted a year ago. A lot of people see him making his debut later this year with the Nationals, and I would not be surprised. I think that's going to happen, and I feel like the Rockies need a guy like that. And I do understand why people might be like, well, what about Toglia? Is if we draft Caglione or Condon, like, are we going to replace? Are we going to get rid of Toglia? Well, no, I don't think so. No, it's just you just like you can like you have to draft, right? So, and if that player's there, take him. And so, again, we're not experts on this, and I'm not an expert on that. But personally, for me, the Rockies, they need a bat. They need a guy like that. And as quoting from the Drew Goodman podcast, he had Rockies player development director Chris Forbes on his podcast, and he was sharing that he's not a part of the draft room, but he said if he was in the draft room, he would lean toward a bat this year. Not to say that they're not going to get pitching this year. They will. I think they're going to do what they did last year is get pitching in the second, third, fourth, fifth round, so on and so forth. But I think they're looking at those top three guys and they want Caglione or Condon. I really do believe that. And if Bazana falls to number 3, they're going to get Bazana. But tomorrow's gonna be fun. It's the Rockies are gonna get a stud either way. If they get Burns again, I'm fine with it. Just make sure that you do your research. Does he do well? Will he perform well in Coors Field? Not just did he do well in college? You want to look at his numbers and say, can this translate well to Coors Field? Can he pitch at Coors Field? Can he hit? And of course, that's probably one of the easier ones because Coors Field is a hitter's ballpark. But you just don't want a guy that's going to strike out much. He doesn't have good play discipline. But all these guys, they have had pretty good play discipline, really good power. And I mean, you're looking at Charlie Condon and Caglione, guys who could hit potentially 40 plus home runs at Coors Field, which would be absolutely amazing. And the Rockies need a guy like that. So something to watch tomorrow. So, again, if for those who are listening on the podcast, or if you're watching live here on YouTube, drop in the comments or just let us know on your social media pages who you'd like for the Rockies to get. Again, we'll kind of have our select, like Tom and I will kind of have our, I guess, predictions, our picks. We'll post that tomorrow morning. And then we'll have the draft and we'll kind of talk about all that good stuff when we go live tomorrow afternoon. But yeah, that basically wraps up tonight's podcast. Again, like the draft is going to be tomorrow evening. It's going to be fun. All-Star festivities are firing up. We got the Home Run Derby on Monday and then an All-Star game on Tuesday. And again, we have a post coming out on Monday for our picks for that, who's going to be our winner. But yeah, for those who are listening on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, we'll talk to you guys probably in the next few weeks. We might, I'd like to maybe consider talking to Lewis, aka Mike from Blake Street Banner, to come on and talk about the Rockies draft prospects. That'd be kind of cool. We'll see if we can contact him for that. But yeah, we'll probably do another podcast in the next few weeks. But meanwhile, we're gonna still continue doing Rockies recaps. We'll do those after every single series the Rockies play. But yeah, it's going to be a fun week. Very, very busy. We've already had, kind of a hectic week already. I was watching the softball celebrity softball game today. That was kind of funny. Back in the day it was fun. I mean, it was kind of fun too, but it's weird when you see people, they don't know how to catch. They don't know how to hit. It's just kind of funny. But again, these are people that don't really know how to play softball, but it's all fun and games. But, yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun. So again, make sure you join us tomorrow because we're gonna have a fun time tomorrow for the draft. So, yeah, I think that wraps it up. So, Tom, any final thoughts as we close out the first half of the Rockies? I mean, again, it's not like, oh my goodness, we're surprised the Rockies are this bad. We kind of saw this coming, but we maybe didn't think that it was going to be this bad.
No, not this bad. It was going to be bad. The point is, it's going to be just sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. And I think they're going to pick the best player, regardless of position. I think they're going to pick the best player that they have on their board.
Yep. Yeah, and the farm system is going to get better starting tomorrow and over the next few days with the draft. So it's going to be fun. Folks, have a good night. Stay safe out there. And we'll talk to you next time here on the Rockies Now podcast. Again, if you don't follow us on Instagram, feel free to do so. We just hit 4,000 followers about a month or two ago. So that was great. We're already at, I believe we're getting close to 4,300, which is great. Go follow us on X. We do Rockies coverage over there as well, and Threads. And follow us here on YouTube. Subscribe to us on the channel. And we do Rockies recaps for all the podcasts. And if you're listening to us here on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, we really appreciate it. And for your listen. And for your support. That'll do it for tonight, folks. As always, go Rockies.